One of the most frequent questions that I get here on the channel is, bro, can you make a video with everything you know about an HDR? And I know exactly what you're looking for, okay? I understand. But the thing is, that's too difficult. Okay, we've discovered so many tricks and tweaks that will be just crazy to try to condense that on a single video. Because I don't do scripts, I don't edit anything. So what I'm gonna try to do is just gonna show you one example, and then I'm just going to try to remember some of the tricks, and then I'm gonna have links in the description of this video so you can watch individually all the tricks in depth. Okay, so it's not that difficult, man. It should be just plug and play, but it's not. I understand the HDR frustration. I was very frustrated. I was gonna return this TV because I thought it was broken. that's how bad the HDR is right now. But it's not that difficult. All you have to do is you need to understand first your display. Okay, what are the capabilities of your display? You need to see if your display is well calibrated, if it is crushing blacks, if the colors look kind of washed out, if it is over brightened, what is the tone mapping target, if it has different tone mapping options, if it has an HGIG option, which means no tone mapping, if you have dynamic tone mapping, or all the tone mapping options. You need to learn about your display specifically to understand what the content needs to have for it to look the best on your display. Because if you're using a PC, you can literally change the content to make it perfect for your display. And this is my first number one recommendation right now. You need to get this Lilium shaders. You need to download Reshade, get the Lilium shaders, and you have to just play around with this, because this is what's going to allow you to make your monitor, especially your monitor, because TVs have some options that sometimes monitors don't. So especially if you're using a monitor for PC gaming, this is a must, okay? With these Lilium shaders, you have to download Reshade, link in the description of the video, download the Lilium shaders on the description, and then you have to, play around with these shaders. So I'm gonna show you one example, so you see one case scenario. But this is something you have to just play around, and it's not that difficult. I'm gonna share with you what are the options that I use the most here. It's not that difficult, you'll see. Then the other thing you have to let's say master okay, is you need to make sure that the black floor is absolutely perfect. That's one thing you have to get absolutely perfect, no matter which display you have. It doesn't matter if you have an LCD and OLED, it does make a difference. The black floor has to be absolutely perfect. So what that means is that you have to have zero blacks. Okay, the blacks have to be absolutely perfect. Let me make this bigger here so you can see it on the screen. So let me get this size here diagram to show you this. Top left size here. Okay, make it as big as possible here so you can see this. You need to make sure that this minimum CLL is 0. Okay, that's a must. It doesn't matter which display you have, which game it is, which tone mapping are you gonna use or not. Always you have to have 0 nits. Not on every single scene, of course not on every single scene. If you have a full white screen, you don't need perfect blacks there. You cannot have them. You have a full white screen, that's HDR too. So it's not always, but obviously in most scenes you will have perfect blacks. You have to have them. And you can clearly see here with this HDR analysis tool, you can clearly see when that black floor is raised. Like here, for example, look at this game. The black floor is raised all the time. You see that bar? That white bar over there? That's the black floor. It is raised. It's never zero. It doesn't matter if you go to a corner on the game, like here. Look, it's not perfect. Do you think you're not supposed to have perfect blacks here? That doesn't make any sense. Of course, you're supposed to get perfect blacks on the shadows. There are no perfect blacks on this game, so you have to fix that. How can you fix that? You have more than one way of fixing that. You can try this Lilium's HDR black floor fix shader, or you can try this Lilium's tone mapping if you're going to use the tone mapping here instead of the tone mapping of the game. And then this tone mapping has also the options to fix that black floor. So for example, here I am using this tone mapping option called BT2390, and then this tone mapping option, which you can see here, BT2390, has this options to fix the black floor. So all you have to do here is to increase this old black point. You increase this to the minimum number, so the smallest number that will give you perfect blacks. That's what I did. So what you do is here, you start increasing this to, for example, 0.9. Boom, you get perfect blacks. Okay, 0.09. Boom, you get perfect blacks, or 1, for example. And like so. And then you start testing the numbers until you get the smallest number here that will give you the perfect blacks. That's what I did there. That's why you see that minimum CLL goes down to 0. Here you see minimum CLL 0. So our black floor is perfect. Okay, that's the thing you have to nail for the contrast and the colors and everything to look good. If you don't have perfect blacks, the HDR is crap. Okay, and it will be crap no matter which display you have, no matter which monitor, which game it is. It will just look bad. Okay, so that's one thing you have to master. You have two options. You can do it here using this Lilium's HDR black floor fix shader, which has even more options to fix that. See here, Lilium's HDR black floor fix. We have this SDR black floor emulation, which is a single click you can use here to fix the black floor. So for example, if I was not using this tone mapping, if I just come here, Lilium's HDR black floor fix shader, and I click here, enable SDR black floor emulation, boom, I fixed that black floor. It goes down to right where it needs to be. Sometimes that's not enough, and you need to increase this number. At this processing cutoff, you need to increase that. But yeah, for the most part, the default is okay. This is gonna fix the black floor in most cases. Now I'm not using this on this example because this will also make the near black darker, and I don't want that right now because I'm using BFI on my LG C1. So when you use BFI, everything becomes darker. So I don't use that in this case. I would just use this black floor lowering and just enter the old black point, which is that the smallest number you need to get perfect blacks. That's what I would do here. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. Then the second thing is, I mean, there are no orders. Okay, just get the Reshade, get the Lilium shaders. And then the other thing you have to do, depending on the game, is you need to, just test what are the game options doing. So you go to your calibration screen on the game, and you're like, okay, let's see which options do we have here. Brightness and maximum HDR luminance. So what is this brightness doing? You start increasing that. And of course, you need to use the game as an example because the majority of the times, this test pattern here is crap. Most games, this test pattern just doesn't help at all. This game is okay. So you need to increase the options you have, increase it and decrease it to see what they're doing. Okay. Most of the time, you're going to have a maximum HDR luminance, like let's say like a peak brightness, a slider that should only affect just the highlights, but don't affect the the lower end of the grayscale. It shouldn't affect near black, basically, just the highlights. And you have a brightness setting, which usually brightness is affecting not the gamma, but it's affecting the visibility of the midtones and near black also. Okay, so if you look at here, this is gonna be affected. Near black is gonna be affected by that brightness. So now, if you increase that brightness, in some games you see that the picture just becomes washed out, completely washed out, because the black floor is being raised with that significantly. But for some games, and this is the best case scenario, you increase that brightness and you still retain that black floor, or if it goes up, it just goes up a little bit. So because I am using BFI, I want to increase that. I want to max that out because I want more visibility for the midtones. But you have to know that in the majority of the times, to not say always, when you increase that brightness to get more brightness for the midtones and for everything, you're washing out the colors. Okay, so you have to look at it. Yes, we have this tool, but at the end we need to use our eyes for sure. So that's something you can play around with. Now my recommendation also is, if you're gonna use this to fix the black floor and to do tone mapping, then you want to max out the game peak brightness slider, because you don't want the game to do tone mapping if you're going to do tone mapping with this tool, because then you're doing tone mapping on the game, tone mapping on the tool, and then on top of that, tone mapping on the TV, for example, like I am using here. I am using on this LGC1 the dynamic tone mapping option to get more brightness, to basically to over brighten the entire picture, because I am using BFI. So then you would have triple tone mapping. You have tone mapping on the game, tone mapping on the tool, and tone mapping on the TV. That's not a good idea. You want to minimize the tone mappings as much as possible to get the best picture. But it works too. You can do it. You can play around with everything. You see, right now I'm using tone mapping because if I use HDRG, it's gonna be too dark for BFI. And the reason is, you can see here, you can see the difference. This is too dark. I have to use dynamic tone mapping. And you see here why. Look at the average brightness of this scene. It's just 18 nits. Okay, that's very dim. So you just have these highlights that are popping and they look very good, but it is not very bright. That's why tone mapping makes that such a huge difference. Okay, so I would say that that's like an introduction, and if you haven't seen these videos before, just get Reshade, download the Lilium shaders, and play around with this HDR black floor fix to fix the black floor of the game. So you can clearly see this line. All you have to do is just to get that line perfect down to 0. Okay, and also play around with this tone mapping shader. This tone mapping shader is going to allow you to do tone mapping. For example, in this case, when I max out the brightness of this game, I'm getting like 2000 nits. Okay, so when I come here to the in-game settings, this maximum HDR luminance at 100% is like 2000 nits. Okay, so what I have to do is to select here 2000 nits, where it says maximum tone mapping brightness on this shader. Let me expand this. You see where it says maximum tone mapping brightness here on this Lilium's tone mapping shader. I just enter here 2000 nits. Okay, and then the target brightness that I'm looking for is 990 nits. It's 1000 nits, so I set it to 990 to get max CLL about 1000 nits. And why am I doing that? Because this dynamic tone mapping on my LGC1 right now is set to 1000 nits. come here 1113 to get to this menu. You see here mastering pick max CLL 1000. Okay, so I am setting the game to be 1000 because I am doing tone mapping on my display with 1000 nits target. Okay, so that's how it works. That's all you have to do. You set the content brightness right here and your display, the brightness you want for your display, depending on what you need. For example, if I'm going to use HGIG on my LGC1, HGIG means no tone mapping, and it has a curve that is going to hard clip at 800 nits. So I would just select here 800 nits if I'm gonna use HGIG. Okay. Now there are other options here. There's this BT2446 method A, and I am not using it because it doesn't have this black floor settings. It doesn't have that. So then I would have to use this, and then I would also have to use the black floor fix. So, you know, the least amount, the fewer the shaders I have to use here, the better. So that's why I'm not using it, but it also looks very good. If the black floor is perfect on the game, you can use that. And it has a very nice gamut compression setting, which allows you to get a more colorful picture if that's what you're looking for. So you see each of these tone mapping methods, they have their own set of settings, okay? And then you have this dice method, which is basically, you know, hard clipping. So I don't like this dice too much because it looks very bright, but you lose details on the highlights. So most of the time, you lose details on the highlights. So that's why I'm not using that dice option. But you can give it a try. It might be the best option depending on the example. Okay. But this is the one I'm liking the most because it has that black floor fix right here, and I don't have to use the HDR black floor fix shader. So this would be HDR summary. Like this is like native HDR summary. You want to use the HDR from the game because it has the potential to look the best. And what you have to fix from the games most of the time is the black floor. After you fix the black floor, you are like 90% there. Then the other thing you have to look for is that peak brightness that you're looking for depending on your display, and you can set that either with the in-game peak brightness slider or just doing tone mapping with this shader. So that would be native HDR. So now what happens if the native HDR is just absolute trash and you cannot fix it? For example, Horizon Zero Dawn, just trash. God of War, absolute crap. Red Dead Redemption. You have, I mean, so many games. I don't, a lot of them. You know what I'm talking about. So Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that's the one I was thinking. That's like probably the worst. This Assassin's Creed Valhalla is just, I cannot understand that HDR. That's probably the worst. That's the one I was thinking. So when you have that case, what are you gonna do? Well, you have the MajorPainTheCactus add-on to Reshade. So there's an add-on to Reshade. So you have to download the Reshade with full add-on support. So you can add this AutoHDR add-on, which is called MajorPainTheCactus, and it looks just absolutely incredible. And it's so easy to set up. It doesn't work for every single game, but it works for most games. And all you have to do is download that add-on, link in the description of the video. And then the only shader you have to use here probably is the Lilium's inverse tone mapping shader. This one, Lilium's inverse tone mapping. And all you have to do with that, it's gonna look washed out because it's not for this. It is for that add-on. It's like an inverse tone mapping. It is an inverse tone mapping shader. So all you have to do with that inverse tone mapping shader is the target brightness. That's it. So you just enter the target brightness depending on your display, and you're done. Okay, rarely you're gonna have to also use the black floor fix shader with that. just make sure every time you're using one of these shaders, make sure you right click, move to top. Okay, so you make sure they work because Reshade has a hierarchy. Okay, so that's all you have to do. MajorPainTheCactus add-on, Lilium's inverse tone mapping, done. If the base HDR is perfect, then you don't have to SDR. If the gamma is perfect, it doesn't have like raised blacks or anything like that, you don't have to use the black floor fixed shader or anything like that. The other thing you have to select, sometimes it's rare, but some games are sRGB. Very few of them. How do you know? Because you're gonna be crushing blacks like crazy. If you open a game with a MajorPainTheCactus mod and you cannot see on the darkness, then it is sRGB, what you have to select here. That's it. So that covers native HDR and an alternative for native HDR, which is gonna look so good that, I mean, you might use it for any game that supports that add-on, which is almost every single Unreal Engine game, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, some of the Ubisoft games like The Division 1. I mean, a lot of games support that. But now, what if that doesn't work? Then you can force auto HDR on any game using a program. Link in the description of the video. It's called Leod Edge. And what that does is that it just forces Windows 11 auto HDR. So when you open the game, you're not going to get the auto HDR message popping on the screen. But auto HDR will be working. And you know it will be working because if you change the brightness of the SDR HDR slider, you're not gonna see any difference. Okay? So that means auto HDR is working. So now, for auto HDR in general, either if you forced it or not, you have to make sure that you download an ICC profile, link in the description of the video, which fixes the majority of the games, because the majority of the games are originally SDR Gamma 2.2. Okay? And Windows 11 is enforcing like a transfer. I remember, I'm not an expert, but it's like a transformation from sRGB to HDR10, and it is enforcing that for auto HDR too, even if the games are originally Gamma 2.2, and the result is that the games look washed out. So what you have to do is you have to download this ICC profile that fixes that problem. Okay, link in the description of the video. I show you how to download it, how to make it work. So then all you have to do for auto HDR is you open the game, you look at the darkness, and if it looks washed out, which it probably will, then you just apply the ICC profile in real time. You will see the difference is big. Okay, and that ICC profile will also fix most of the SDR content on Windows. Okay, even YouTube videos and I mean almost everything. Okay, the desktop, how everything looks. But yeah, some games are originally SDR sRGB. If that's the case, then auto HDR is gonna look perfect with the HDR calibration app profile. So that's the other thing. For auto HDR, you can use the HDR calibration app profile, and that's gonna work for originally SDR sRGB games, which is very few. And that will also affect native HDR, because native HDR on Windows is this sRGB to HDR conversion, basically. So that's it. And then if for some reason you cannot force auto HDR, you can always use the SDR HDR slider and the ICC profile for the majority of the games that are originally SDR Gamma 2.2, and just increase the brightness. And if your display is an LG TV, basically, it's the only displays I know of that can do this. you can use this, you can use tone mapping off, and then come here and you select this 1113111, and you select the tone mapping to be 540, because when you max out that SDR HDR slider, this is the max CLL of the content. It's like 498, almost 500 nits. So by doing this, you will push all the brightness. It doesn't matter if you have a G3, a G4, whichever TV you have, it will push all the brightness regardless of the actual peak brightness of the TV. Okay, because this will do tone mapping. So that would be my recommendation. Just use the SDR HDR trick. That's it. I mean, we can do other things like, you know, forcing HLG and all of that, and maybe other tricks that I'm missing right now. But that's it. That's it. Try to fix native HDR. That doesn't work. MajorPainTheCactus. That doesn't work. Forced AutoHDR. That doesn't work. SDR HDR trick. That's the hierarchy, basically. Never SDR. I mean, no reason to use SDR just because HDR looks better. Okay, it just, I mean, if you have, for example, if you have one of these QD OLEDs like the S95C or something like that on SDR, if you push all the brightness, maybe that looks better than the SDR HDR trick just on SDR, because you are able to push all the brightness, maybe. But I would still try the SDR HDR trick. Maybe you can get better results with that. But let me know if you have one of those QD OLEDs. So again, before I end the video, link in the description to everything individually, everything that I mentioned in this video, and let me know if you still have any questions. I'm still going to cover like a new game if it comes out, if I'm gonna play it, the HDR settings, but I don't think it is necessary. I don't think it is. If you do this, just play around with this tool, you will figure it out, because it's not rocket science. It's very, very simple. So yeah, let me know your thoughts and opinions, and if you have any questions.